keys to the kingdom. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. We got the keys to the kingdom. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. There's joy in the kingdom. Hey, I know it is. There's peace in the kingdom. Hey, yes it is. We got the keys to the kingdom. Yes we do, I know we do. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. We got the keys to the kingdom. Yes we do, I know we do. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. No matter what you're going through, Jesus got the keys for you. You can bind things on earth, it shall be bound in heaven. You can loose things on earth, it shall be loose in heaven. We will. We got the keys to the kingdom. Yes, we do. I know we do. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. Ever you made. We got the keys to the kingdom. Ever you made. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. Keys to the kingdom. He had them for me and you. Keys to the kingdom, I know he do. We got the keys to the kingdom. Yes, we do, I know we do. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. Ever you we got the keys to the kingdom. Joy, peace. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord. Ever you we got the keys to the kingdom. Yes, we do. I know we gonna unlock the things from the Lord. Peace. We got the keys to the kingdom. Yes, we do. I know we gonna unlock the things from the Lord. Ever you made the keys to the kingdom. Yes, we do. I know we gonna unlock the things from the Lord. Ever you made the keys to the kingdom. We gonna unlock the things from the Lord.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome. God bless you. God bless each and every one of you on tonight. This is Dr. David D. King, and I am the host of Kingdom Citizens of Wisconsin, and we want to welcome everybody. We're excited about tonight. We got a great show tonight. Great show. The Constitutional Queen will be on any second. I just got to take care of something to make sure everything is working well. So I want to welcome you all here tonight. We just thank God for each and every one. As y'all come in, y'all know, put down the county that you're coming in from. While we're waiting on the Constitutional Queen to join us, because she's also a county supervisor for Jackson County, and she had a board meeting, and then she will be right here with us. So until she comes, I want to make an announcement. This coming Saturday, September 24th, not Saturday the 17th, but September 24th at 3 o'clock p.m. We will have a book signing uh, on Saturday from 3 to 5, 4030 North 34th Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53216 is where we're having the book signing, and it is going to be awesome. The title of the book is Why It Is Important to Stay in the Middle from a Kingdom Perspective. So we want to invite each and every one of you out um, for the book signing. Please come out and support. Um, I think you will love the book. It's going to be very controversial to some, but it's very educational. Um, and that's the whole purpose of the book, to make people think. So we want you to come out. I'm excited about uh, the book signing. The books will be delivered tomorrow at my front door. So I'll probably do a Facebook Live to show you guys about those books that are going to be coming. And they will be here on tomorrow uh, evening. So we're grateful for everyone that has already called or text or inbox and say they want a autographed copy, which you will get. And I will make sure we get the books out to you. But it's going to be a beautiful book signing on next Saturday, September 24th. So please come out and join us. Now, while I'm waiting on um, the Constitutional Queen to come, I want to share something. Let me set up the phone as well. There we go. I wanted to share something, and this is mainly for Milwaukee and parents in Milwaukee. Um, Parents all over the state are upset and they're fighting for their children because of what they're doing in the education system. And I'm challenging the people in Milwaukee, whether you parents, community leaders, pastors, youth pastors, uh, to join us in this fight, because our children's future is at stake, and what they're doing to our kids right now is a shame. It's a shame before God. It's a shame before man, for them to try to indoctrinate our children into how should I say this? Into what they're doing, confusing them with their sexuality. And so I'm looking for uh, people in Milwaukee that want to fight for the children in the city of Milwaukee. I saw a post that this Friday for public schools, which is tomorrow, is the day that they do they count. And parents should make a bold statement and do not allow their kids to go to school for that count, because that count deals with their money. And so I think we ought to hit them in their pocket. I think we ought to begin to address some things, challenge some things, deal with it in a way where they will not expect, especially in Milwaukee. It has been so quiet here when it comes to our children education. So I want to challenge parents in the Milwaukee area to get up and fight. I want to challenge parents to take a stand when it comes to your children's future. I want pastors, especially youth pastors. How can you have a church with a youth ministry and you don't know what's going on in the school system with our children? We have to be informed. We have to be engaged. We have to begin to do things that others will not do. And we have to start to say things that others will not say. So we need to come together and fight for our children. We need to come together and stand boldly with our children because their future is at stake. And I've been saying it for a while now. We have to, we cannot afford not to say anything. We can't be silent anymore. We cannot allow them to get away with everything that they're doing or trying to do to our children. We cannot afford to continue to allow them to do the things that they are doing when it comes to our babies. And so I think that, and this is a challenge for parents in the Milwaukee area. This is your chance to get up. This is your chance to fight for your children. I'm also putting the challenge out to the pastors because pastors need to get in this fight. Pastors need to stand up for what's right. Pastors need to make sure that the children' future is intact. And so, as we as pastors, we have to get in this fight. We have to start making some noise and letting them know enough is enough. We have, I think, two, maybe three school boards races in Milwaukee in the spring of 2023. And we need qualified people that's going to shake up Milwaukee County, the city of Milwaukee um, school. We have to get involved. We have to make some noise. We have to let people know that enough is enough. And we cannot continue to go down the road that we are going. We cannot continue to allow children to graduate that can't do math, that can't read, can't write. We cannot continue to allow 9% of the children can read at a grade school level, the high school level, and do math, but 91% cannot. And we have to do something about it. We have to be willing to take a stand and say, you know what? We're going to take our education system back, that our children will get a better education. So we're excited about the fight. I always get excited about a fight. I love a good fight. And we got to fight for our children. We got to make sure that our children are being taken care of. We got to make sure that somebody is letting them know that our children is very important, that our children, that we there for our children, that we are there, that we're not going to allow this mess to continue to go forward. We're not going to allow the bad performance in the education system. We have to take a stand. We really have to take a stand. And we can't take a stand sitting on the sideline. We have to get in the game. We have to get in the game. It's too much at stake, especially for our children. It's too much at stake. And they are pushing it all the way to grade school, K4, K5. And they're pushing this on our children. And they're telling our children, they're confusing a little girl who daddy called her princess. And I am in my office. You like my office? I'm in my office. But we cannot afford to continue to allow this thing to happen when it comes to our kids. We cannot allow um, people to mess their brain up, mess up their head. And the thing about it is, parents, if we don't fight now, if we don't fight right now for our kids, if we don't do anything, uh, Cat, don't be trying to bust a person out now. Don't don't even do that. My office is beautiful. This is my office. You don't like my office background or something? So I don't know who's saying good evening because your name didn't come up, but good evening to you. The Constitutional Queen will be joining us any minute. She's a county supervisor in Jackson County, and they had a board meeting, and then she is jumping on. But Milwaukee, we have to stand up. We have to stand up for the kids in Milwaukee. This is a crying out shame. Hey, Liz, how you doing? Good evening to you. Your birthday is coming up. Is it tomorrow? Happy birthday to you. But you guys, we got to really fight for our children. We have to. We got to. It's not even an option anymore. It's something that we must do. It's something that we can't afford to sit on the sideline and not do anything. Not do anything. Sure, sir. Come on with it, J Rod, my brother. And so we want to, we have to uh, begin to speak out against everything that's going on. And so J Rod, why don't you call in and tell that joke? Oh, let's see. What would her name be? Okay, I give up. What would her name be? Okay. So um, I don't know if everybody saw uh, what the state is doing to our children. Um, and it's sad that there's not enough noise being made by parents, that we're not really being involved in what's really going on, what's really being said. It's sad that we are allowing them to do this to our children, um, and we're not saying anything. So, I think the parents need to really begin in Milwaukee to get involved, because that ain't how your children, that is not how your children, that's how uh, the school system is putting into your children. Our children is not being born gay. Our children is not born confused. Our children is not being born having desire to switch sex. That's not our children. That's something, somebody's indoctrinating them with that crap. And it's in the schools. It's in the schools right now that are indoctrinating our children and telling our little girls that they're no longer princess. Telling our little children in K4, K5, the normal is not a man and a woman, a mommy and a daddy. The normal is two mommies or two daddies. And people, please don't say it ain't happening, because we have in our congregation a parent that had to go and address that because uh, her daughter came home with that, or a young man came home in the city of Milwaukee and told his mama, "You told me I can be whatever I want to be," and the mama said yes, and he said, "Okay, then I want to be a you." She says, "A what?" He says, "A you." She said, "What do you mean a you?" He says, "A you. I want to be a you. I want to be identified as a you." Where did he get that? Because what the mother told me was before he started going to school, he was always saying that he was going to be a good father, that he was going to be a good husband, he was going to get married, have children, and everything like that. So here you have a kid whose dream was to be a husband and a father to now want to be a you. And this is something that we're okay with, and we have to really get involved. We have to really get started. We have to really get in there because, and pastors need to get involved because if they doing it at the school and they come to your church and they already confused and they want to be called a little boy and you trying to tell them something different, then you're going to probably end up getting in trouble. Just like if a parent don't agree, then child protection agency is going to be knocking on that parent door. So we got to intercept it now. We got to do something right now that will change this thing for the better. We have to make sure that our children are being taken care of, that our children are being looked after. We have to do it ourselves. Nobody going to do it for us. Nobody is going to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves. We have to be willing to rise up. And again, they're rising up everywhere except for the city of Milwaukee. We have to rise up in the city of Milwaukee and challenge our school boards members in the city of Milwaukee and ask them, why are you allowing this mess to happen in our school system? Why Milwaukee school system is one of the worst in the state? Why is Milwaukee school system graduating people that can't read and write? And parents, you need to start having conversations with your children when they come home. Not having a conversation saying, did you do your homework? What did you talk about in school today? What are they telling you in school today? Those are the conversations you need to be having with your children. Those are the conversations you need to be uh, having to the fact so you will know for sure what is being done in your child's school. And here's the thing. If everybody leave the school, the public schools, a lot of people won't have nowhere to go. And that's why I'm excited to announce opening up in the fall of 2023, Kingdom Ecclesia Academy. That's right. We found the problem and we came up with a solution. Kingdom Ecclesia Academy will be open, a school that are training agents of change. We are training our young people to be the best that they can be. The curriculum is out of this world. You hear me? One of the best curriculums out there for the school. We're excited about it. We're excited that we'll be opening up the school. We're doing things now to raise the funds that we need. We will not touch uh, state or federal dollars opening up this school. We will not do that. But what we will do is we will open the school, and I get into more detail later as we going down the line. Um, but Kingdom Ecclesia Academy is designed to train the future agents of change to make them become the best that they can be, make them be some amazing critical thinkers that can challenge anything and can compete with everybody across the world. So we're excited about Kingdom Ecclesia. We will have it open from K5 to 12th grade. We're excited about it. Um, we are going through right now and doing all the groundwork, but we have an answer. We will be opening up Kingdom Ecclesia Academy, training agents of change. That is what we're going to be doing in Kingdom Ecclesia Academy. And when we get further down the road, we will start to even share more. I think Dr. Duke Pesto will be working with Dr. Duke Pesto in the um, stages of getting the school up and running. We're excited about it. So we want you guys to come on out. The Constitutional Queen will be popping in any second, and then we're going to start the teaching on the Constitution. And I'm so grateful for the Constitutional Queen to be with us, to teach, take time to teach. People have been telling me they've been learning so much because people know of the Constitution. They don't know, they really don't know the Constitution. It's just like people might read the Bible, but everybody doesn't study the Bible. The Bible didn't say read to show yourself approved unto God, but the Bible says study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that not need to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. And with the Constitution, we got to study it so we can rightly divide it, so we understand exactly what it says about us, for us, and that we will be able to exercise it right. Because here's the thing, practice doesn't make perfect, because you can practice something wrong and be perfectly wrong, but perfect practice make perfect. So if I go and I grab something and I'm learning, for example, if I go in and I get the Constitution and we're talking about the First Amendment, and we're going to say, okay, we're gonna exercise our First Amendment, and you begin to exercise your First Amendment, but you're setting buildings on fire. That means you didn't read the Constitution, because nothing in the Constitution says you can set buildings on fire. Nothing in the Constitution say that as you gather you can destroy other people's property. So we need to go back and we need to study, and we need to know exactly right. We need to study the 13th Amendment. I was talking to a gentleman today, and we got to talking about the Civil Rights Act that Lyndon LBJ signed, right? The Civil Rights Act. So I asked him a question. I said, now, LBJ did sign the Civil Rights Act, right? And everybody know LBJ, he's a Democrat, he signed the Civil Rights Act. I said, but let me ask you a question. Who passed that bill so that Lyndon B. Johnson can sign it? Who passed it? And he was like, wow, that's a good question. He said, to be honest, I don't know who passed it. And I told him the Republican passed it and Lyndon B. Johnson had to sign it. And didn't want to sign it, but he signed it, and he says, I know how I get you guys. I'll do war on poverty. And when he did war on poverty, it kicked the man out of the house. And the war on poverty, it kicked the man out of the house. And I heard, who was it? I believe it was Candace Owens. And the Black community is more in poverty now than it ever been before the war on poverty. So the government spent trillions of dollars to put us deeper in poverty than before they did the war on poverty. That the Black community might have not had everything, but it was not this bad off. And I had to look at that. And when you go and you start to research and you look at the charts and you look at the traditional marriages and how strong the Black family was, because they had both parents in the house. And how I remember coming up, they didn't believe in charity. What they believed in, if you gave them something, you got it right back because your word was everything. I remember we could go to the corner store and said, Mama want a bag of chicken wings, some rice, can of peas, some bread, and she'll pay you on Friday. And because of our last name had credit. That was our credit, our last name. And we would get it, and Mama would make sure she was there on Friday to pay it. So our last name was our credit. It wasn't a credit score, it was your word. Your word was your bond. And so we we had we had it pretty good. I remember a lot of work outside the community, and then they spent their money in the community. So, with government help, the Black community has gotten worse with government help. It hasn't gotten better, it has got worse. And so it tells family, if you split up, we'll help you. If you split up, we'll give you the money. If you split up, we'll give you the food stamps. We'll give you Section 8 if you split up. Because why? Because their job is to destroy the family. Government always been against family. And so when we begin to look at this for what it really is, it's about all of us going back to the basics, be it neighbors one to another, because you're going to come to a time. Uh, you're going to come to a time where you're going to need your neighbor. I try to be neighborly all the time with my neighbors. And what I would do, even in the wintertime, what I would do when I'm shoveling my snow, I shovel their snow. And what my neighbor does, he comes behind me and he'll go in the alley with his snowblower and he'll uh, uh, do both driveways to our garages. You know, one act of kindness, another act of kindness follows. So we got to go back to being neighborly. We got to look out for each other's children. I had a neighbor who looked out um, for my house. My daughter was sitting on my steps, and as soon as I pulled up, he was like, "Hey, there was a young lady sitting on your steps," and he described us. Oh, that's my daughter. He was like, "Oh, okay. I was just looking out for you." So when you become neighbors again or a village again, then we become stronger. We become stronger, and we got to learn to become a village again. Look out for each other's children. We got to become that village again, and become my brother's keeper. And the church has to come back community oriented and go back to the community and be that light for the community and go through the community and making sure everybody is okay. Now I saw something on Channel 6, I think it was today, and they was talking about Brady Street becoming dangerous. And they really starting to talk about Brady Street, Water Street being dangerous, and they want to fix Brady Street and Water Street. And I thought about it for a minute, and I said, I know why they want to fix Brady and Water Street. It's because that's where the money come in. They never talk about 27th and Burleigh. They never talk about 13th and Concordia. They never talk about Richards and Burleigh. They never talked about areas where there's a lot of shooting, about, oh, we need to really go in there and we need to go do something about it. But you focus on Brady Street and Water because that's where the money is. That's where people go and party. That's where people go and spend their money. But the average family, you're not concerned about that child that might be doing their homework or playing in their room and a stray bullet coming in their house. That's not important to you because that's not money. So what you rather do is focused on the money. This is why we got to get a grip on our government, our local government, that we're taking care of one another. This is why it's so important that we make sure that everything we do it to the glory of God. We gotta go back to the basics. And we gotta make sure that the things that we do or doing is going to be uh, making everybody life better. Because it's going to come a time where your neighbor is sick and they can't shovel the snow, and just a kindness act, just an act of kindness to go shovel their snow, and don't even look for nothing, just shovel it and then go in the house. My neighbors didn't know I was shoveling their snow unless they looked out the window. I didn't go knock on their door and say, "Would you mind if I shovel your snow?" I just did it. Because why? Because I'm trying to be neighborly. I speak to my neighbors. We had a birthday party. We took birthday cake over to their children and said, "Would y'all like some birthday cake?" It's just about being kind to one another, showing love to one another. Um, and so we have a lot of work to do. And in the process of it, um, we got to be willing to invest back into our communities. We got to be willing to invest in our children. We got to be willing to invest in uh, let's see, one another, our businesses. I saw a clip of a school. It was called the most dangerous school in America, and it was in Philadelphia. And there was this lady, uh, was the principal, a black lady. She took over the school. She was a principal. They fought all the time. I mean, they had all kind of fights, knives, everything. And this young man went up to her and said, "Got a bullet with your name on it." So he literally threatened to kill her. They showed the 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 documentary of the Columbine, and teachers was crying, but the students was laughing. And she was like, "Why are y'all laughing?" And they were like, "We live through that every day in their neighborhood." And it dawned on her. She said, "Wait a minute, they need love." So she began to love on those kids, telling them they beautiful, telling them they smart, telling them they got a nice smile, that you need to smile more. And the young man that told her that he had a bullet with her name on it became the star quarterback and led them to an undefeated season. Undefeated season. And then he wanted to go to the University of Pittsburgh. And she set him up a field trip to go to that school, to the University of Pittsburgh, to take a tour. She invested to the fact that her life was threatened. But she invested because what she believed in. Now, how many of us are willing to invest even if they threaten our lives? Because some of us, we know what we're doing and the fights we're doing. They're threatening us. They're threatening our lives. They're saying things about us and everything. But are we? Look, my tongue getting tied. Is every one of us really, really ready to put everything on the line for the sake of our children? Something to think about. So, are you really ready to be in this fight to uh, put everything on the line to turn this country around? Or are we one of those that says, "You know what? I'm gonna fight until it get hot, and then I'm gonna run. I'm not. I'm not going to risk my life. I'm not crazy. I'm not going to risk my life. But when you get in these kind of fights, that's what you're literally doing. So let me ask you, ladies and gentlemen, a question. Are you ready for some teaching? Are you ready for some teaching? Because this lady right here, I know she's already excited. I know she's already pumped. I know she's been waiting and waiting because she skipped a week. It wasn't her fault, but she skipped a week. And I know you guys, she is ready to teach. So without further ado, let me bring in the constitutional queen.
Hello, hello. Apologies for being late. I was doing my civic duty and showing up for a board meeting. So
Well, at least you one of those elected officials that shows up.
yeah. Well, and it would usually be done a lot sooner, but the people on the board are rather chatty, so it takes forever to get through one agenda item. So
Oh, wow. Well, we're so glad to have you.
it's good to be
And,
here. I'm glad.
okay, I'm just turning up your mic. Say something else for me.
Hello, 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 hello.
Okay, perfect. So now, is the constitutional queen ready?
I am.
All
I've,
right.
I've been sitting on these notes for 2 weeks.
Okay, take it away.
All right, here we go. So, first question, why did we fight the Revolutionary War?
That's a good question.
It's a very good
And
question.
please, people, don't just say taxation without representation.
You're jumping ahead of me there, Dr.
Okay.
King.
All right, you guys. That's the
I
question.
was waiting to hear that first taxation without representation, because that's what everybody is taught, is that we were fighting against the unfair taxation of the British colonies, and well, obviously that was not completely correct. It was one of the grievances that they had, but how many grievances were actually listed in our Declaration of Independence?
Whoa. 27.
Oh, come on. I'm speaking to the choir here, I think.
No, the reason I know that, and I should have waited before, but I just want you to know that well, you already know, your student knows,
Yeah.
but the reason I did, because I did a study, and and I
Mhm.
believe that taxation was number 17. It was
Yeah.
down. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
it was far down the list. Yeah.
yeah.
And it was almost kind of like an afterthought. It's like, "Oh yeah, and by the way, taxation without representation." So yeah. So we fought the Revolutionary War for far more reasons than just that we were being taxed and penalized as British colonists. We had issues for a dozen different things, and a lot of it had to do with the judiciary. A lot of it had to do with the king's abuses of his power. So the king was the executive, but he was judge and jury in many cases, and so there were no checks and balances. And so the king could make the laws, and then he could change them on a whim if he decided that he didn't want to give the colonists a fair representation. He could instill his own uh, his own authorities in the colonies and never actually let them know ahead of time. Right? He would just, oh, by the way, here's your new justice, here's your new whatever the case it was, here's your new mayor, and the colonists had no say in it. And so yeah, so when we hear in the schools that we were fighting for taxation or fighting for taxation with representation, that's a very, very, very small part of it. So interestingly enough, though, the reason why we first started giving out these grievances was because of the very well-known understanding of the colonists, of the founding fathers, that that human rights were an acknowledged fact. When they say unalienable rights, when they say self-evident, it's because the Western culture had been acknowledging that there were God-given rights for many generations. So it wasn't that the king didn't understand the concept of human rights or didn't understand the concept of God-given rights. It was that he was deciding to play the God figure, and so he decided, well, if I'm God, if I have this divine right, I can choose for the colonists, or I can choose for my people which rights they can have and which rights they don't. Hold on one second. Can you find your father for whatever issue you have? Okay, thank you. All right. So yeah, so this idea of human rights was not a new topic. It had been discussed, it had been debated, it had been acknowledged in the Western world for a very long time. The problem was that though the British government wrote these human rights into their laws, they were very much ignored when they wanted them to be ignored. So yeah, there were no checks and balances, and that's why the colonists, when they started the United States of America, when they decided to break away from the monarchical style of government, they wanted to do a Republican style of government because there were democratic elements, but a pure democracy would not survive any more than a monarchy or an anarchy or any of those other archies, because there was no protections, there were no checks and balances that would allow the people to hold on to the rights that were given by God. There was no ultimate acknowledgement that was that the people could hold on to and, show them. So they had the Magna Carta, they had all of those, and they were all listing the human rights. But the problem was that nobody was actually, nobody in charge was actually listening to that and acknowledging that for the most part. So if you had a good king, okay, it would be a benevolent monarchy. They'd allow people their rights. But if you had an evil king, well, you would have to cut off his head or exile him from the country in order to get your rights back. So that was kind of the deal. So America was the first government that put checks and balances on the government and allowed the people to overturn or reform the government that were in violation of their rights. So you have, for the first time in history, the people being in charge of keeping the restraint on the government. Whereas before, the government didn't have any restraints. Now you have a government that said, okay, we have human rights and God comes first as the ultimate authority. There is no king. We are all kings and priests. And so we're in charge of restraining our own government, and we're in charge of restraining our own behaviors and things. So that's where we got the idea of self-governance. It was no longer, serfs on a lord's land, renting the property and then having to give back everything they made off of that property. They had their own property. They had their own ways of living and all of that stuff. So yeah, so America did a new thing with an old concept, right? So isn't that kind of that? What is that verse in? Is it? Oh gosh, what is it? Jeremiah? No, where it says, "I'm giving you," or "Behold, I'm doing a new thing." Where he's talking about this. There's going to be a new covenant kind of a deal, and that's exactly where America was going with it. So, the First Amendment debates, we're still kind of talking about the First Amendment debates. The First Amendment debates took place between June 7th and September 25th, 1789. They're in the congressional records. So if anybody wants to go and read some long, boring material, it's there. Go check it out. It tells you everything that they talked about. And they took meticulous notes back then. So everything was written down. So anytime there were questions and concerns and stuff, it was brought up. And they even recorded when they, had heated arguments about things. So so that's a really great resource. I actually have a print off of all of the debates that James Madison took notes on for the Constitutional Convention when they wrote the Constitution, and that is like a 3-inch binder. So it's huge, and there's a lot, but it is interesting to read anyway. So the limits that were put on the federal government were in 2 specific areas. We had preventing from establishing an official national denomination, and we're talking about the religious right? So this was the Establishment Clause. Congress shall make no law regarding the establishment of religion. That was making a national denomination. In the Western culture, the thrones, the monarchy decided what denomination would be nationally recognized, and any other denomination was penalized. You could not be a practicing Protestant in a Catholic monarchy, right? And so on and so forth. And so we're kind of going over a review of this, I know, but these were a reminder that we're limiting the federal government's abilities, right? We're giving them enumerated powers, and we're saying this is what you can touch and this is what you can't. So in the Establishment Clause, they were prevented from establishing an official denomination. And then in the Free Exercise Clause, they were prohibited, the federal government was prohibited from interfering or limiting public religious expression, right? So not only can they not set up a national, like a favored denomination, but they also can't interfere with our public expression of whichever denomination it was, right? And so it really did cover all of the gaps in the protection of that right. The problem is our government today turns that on its head and completely refuses to recognize that, and they use precedent to try to argue for government interference in religion. So in the entire debates that took place about the First Amendment, not once was there a mention of separation of church and state, because the founders didn't agree with that. They didn't think that the church should be separated from the state. So in Congress in 1854, it was actually recorded by Congress in the congressional record that Christianity was the religion of the founders. They intended it to remain that way, and no one Christian denomination would be shown favoritism. So it didn't say Muslim was the religion of the founders, or Islam was the religion of the founders. It didn't say Buddhism. It didn't say Jainism or any of the other isms. It said Christianity was the religion of the founders. And so when they established their government, that was well known and recognized. The only thing that was changed about that was that they were not allowed to use a denomination. It was just Christianity across the board. In 1856, again, Congress said the great vital and conservative element in our system, that is the thing that holds our system together, is the belief of our people in the pure doctrines and divine truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ. Again, in the congressional record. This is in 1856. Congress writing.
So are you trying to tell me, let me turn my mic down. Are you trying to tell me that in writing, in black and white,
Yes,
that it is there?
yes, yes. Yeah.
And,
and they even state the gospel of Jesus Christ, the pure doctrines and divine truths of the gospel of Jesus Christ. They recognized and acknowledged, Congress recognized and acknowledged that the true religion in the world was Christianity.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is, again, I know we're kind of reviewing a bit, but I just really wanted to emphasize this because these First Amendment rights, the first 2 of those rights, really set the bar for every other Bill of Rights that was allowed. It was written into the Constitution. And again, we're saying the Bill of Rights was separate from the Constitution in that they were amendments, but they were not the same as the other amendments that came after the 10 amendments, right? The first 10 amendments limited government involvement and interference. Any of the amendments that came after that actually gave government more power. So when their intentions with putting these first 10 in were to put more black and white emphasis on where the government was limited and how little interference they had in our private lives. So yeah, but it all started with the belief in Christianity, and it's just amazing to me how very subtly and very slowly that was inched out little by little. And really we started to see that let's see. In 1892, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that Christian principles must remain the basis for American laws and institutions. There were 80 precedents behind this decision. The Supreme Court in 1892 unanimously ruled that Christian principles must remain the basis for American laws and institutions. Now, what was an institution back then? The public school? And the Supreme Court ruled that that institution had to keep Christian principles as its basis, as its foundation. That was almost the turn of the century, and they were still saying that in the judicial branch of our federal government. Oh, you're muted, Dr. King.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'm just waiting on someone to challenge this.
I know. I'm looking at the comments going, okay, who's going to say something?
I am definitely looking for someone to try to challenge something because, I think what's happening is they hear things without looking it up.
Yeah.
And so if they would have paid attention, right?
Yeah.
One person would have never got prayer out of school.
Nope. No, because that's when the precedents started changing. So in 1962, right before the prayer and everything got pulled out of school, the Supreme Court redefined church as a religious activity in 1962. They had no precedent for it. They just simply rewrote the definition of what church was. So before it was a body politic, right? It was an institution. It was a major part of of American life, and then they redefined it as just an activity. Well, when it's an activity, right, it is no longer a worldview. It's no longer something that takes up space in somebody's life. It's voluntary then, right? And so they can choose to redefine how we read the First Amendment, because then it is no longer an establishment and it's no longer free exercise. It is an optional activity that some people choose to do.
Oh, wow.
So that's when they started really redefining it. And then in 1963, the reason why the Bible was taken out of the schools was because instead of going back to earlier Supreme Court decisions and earlier writings of the founders, they pulled in a psychologist with no precedent, they never had a psychologist sitting up there explaining to the Supreme Court why the Bible was so damaging. But this psychologist got up and said, and I quote, "If portions of the New Testament were read without explanation, they could be and had been psychologically harmful to the child."
But transgender is not.
But transgenderism is not. Yes. Well, that comes later. But yeah, but this is really a setup for taking God out of the public sphere, because they made it an optional activity. And no longer was it a principle that had to remain, right? As the Supreme Court said in 1892, it was an optional activity. And therefore, the government was separating itself from that principle and stating, well, if you teach about John the Baptist's beheading and don't explain exactly everything around that and why that happened, you could completely damage a child's psyche, and we can't do that. So they took the Bible out, right? Yeah. along those lines, some recent Supreme Court justices, and I've got to find who exactly said these quotes, but they was listed in an article talking about several of the Supreme Court justices on the more liberal side, basically claimed now to be amateur psychologists on a psycho journey, or a national theology board, or a super board of education for every school district in the nation. So now our Supreme Court is no longer a judicial branch who adjudicates the law. They are now psychologists, theologists, and the Board of Education.
And that's why we messed up.
And that's why we're messed up.
That
Yes.
when I look at that, right, and you
Mhm.
and you says, okay, so the Supreme Court got out of their lane and jumped
Yep.
in 3 different lanes.
Yep.
How do you jump in 3 different lanes?
Well, for one thing, the people weren't watching. They weren't paying attention.
Mm.
And the church sat down. So yeah, so these secular mandates, they began to be more and more secular. They took those principles out and they became very secularized. After the 1960s, they continued almost completely unopposed. So they even took nursery rhymes that had no mention of God in them, but could be related to a godly characteristic. They took nursery rhymes out of the teaching because it could have endangered the children's psyches, because it might relate to God on some level. So yeah, it just, I mean, once you let them go, you give them an inch and they take a mile or more. And this is where we're at now with our schools. And that was the planned I hate to say it, but the planned slippery slope that people even back in the 1800s were already discussing and debating and saying, this is what we want to do in our schools. We have to get God out in order to make it work. So this is not a new thing. The principles of God have been attacked since day one of the American colonies becoming the United States. But at one point in our government, we had principled people who understood they had to fight back against that. And once we lost that, we have weak conservatives who do nothing. I'm just reading Democracy in America. And one of the things that he talks about is that we have 2 sides to the coin, right? We have the conservatives, who are, basically God-fearing, church-going, but the problem with them is that they don't want change. They hate change, and so they are unwilling to even touch it, even if it's a good change, right? And then you have the progressives who are like, let's throw out the whole book and start completely over, and we're going to change the very fundamental nature of our country, right? And so he was worried even back then. That was in the 1830s, right before, or sorry, 1830s, 1840s, before leading up to the Civil War. So he was seeing this in America. He was seeing it in France, and he was saying, you guys, the church needs to do something about this. Mm-hmm. And the progressives we need to slow down the progressives, because they're going to destroy America. And you guys are like the best example of what a free country looks like. These are the two groups you need to look out for. The religious conservatives who don't change what needs to be changed, and the progressives who look at a boundary line and go, I'm not even going to check to see why that boundary was there. I'm just tossing it. I don't like it.
Right. And that's why chapter 1 of my book, and it'll be here tomorrow.
Exciting.
But the first chapter of the book is called The Danger of Two Parties. Mm-hmm. And you got one, and I was telling the gentleman this today, you got one that totally voting and making laws against God. Mm-hmm. And then you got the other side, they perpetrating to say they for God, but they won't stand up. Yeah. And I'm tired of people telling me I belong to God, but you won't stand for God. Yeah. You don't stand for God. You're allowing them to talk about the principles without God in there with the principles,
Yeah. Yeah, so they're borrowing God's principles, but they're refusing to acknowledge who actually set them in place.
Yes,
Yeah.
and that's just like, you know, I can come in your house and say, go to bed, right?
Yeah.
And the kids, well, they might and they might not. Because I took the authority away from go to bed.
Mm-hmm.
But if I walked in your house and say, yo, daddy said go to bed now, they going to bed.
Mm-hmm.
But if I just go in there and say go to bed, they're gonna be like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
But
Says who?
right. And that's what happens when we try to use the principles of God, but don't put God with his principles.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. So yeah, so this is where we're at. But I wanted to re-emphasize some of the rights that were set down in the Bill of Rights and in the Declaration. So again, I might be beating a dead horse, but I really want to emphasize this because this is just such an exciting part of history that we really need to cling to if we want to get our country back to the way it's supposed to be. If we want to redeem it and restore it, we have to bring it back to God's principles. And the signers understood that. So 29 of the 56 declaration signers had seminary degrees. So literally went to school for seminary. And so they were ordained ministers, many of them.
Mm-hmm.
When people say that the Declaration and the Constitution were not written with the Bible in mind, well, let me tell you, and I'm going to give you these verses. You can look them up for yourself. Article 1, Section 8 talks about uniform immigration, right?
Yep.
Leviticus 1934. That's where they got that from.
Say it again.
Leviticus 1934. You guys really need to bring notebooks to this because I've got things for you to take notes on. So Leviticus 1934 talks about uniform immigration, the rules that were set in place for how immigration was going to be handled in America. Article 1, Section 8, right? And that came straight from the Bible. Here's another one. Article 2, Section 1. President had to be natural born.
Oh, yes.
That comes from Deuteronomy 17:15.
Yes.
It talks about who got to be in charge, right? Article 3, Section 3. It talks about witnesses. When you need witnesses for two or more witnesses. That was Deuteronomy 17:6. We have Article 3, Section 3 talking about attainder. That's a word we don't hear very often. And where did I put my definition? Give me a second. Find attainder. Okay, so attainder means under English common law, the state of having lost one's legal and civil personhood as through losing the legal capacity to own or pass on property. So this was the idea. If your parent or a family member was guilty of treason, then the whole family lost everything, right? And so in Article 3, Section 3, it talks about attainder, and let me look it up real quick, and then I'll give you the verses. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of 2 witnesses to the same overt act or on confession in open court. The Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but no attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. So only the person who committed the crime was guilty of it and could lose their stuff. It didn't mean their family was punished for it as well. That came from Ezekiel 18:20. And I believe that one had to do with the sins of the fathers. Basically, that the sins of the fathers did not pass down to their children. Basically, they were not responsible for the children. Were not responsible for their father's sins. Everybody was responsible for their own. Separation of powers. Here's another one. The separation of powers. We talked about it a little bit, right? Where God is judge, king, and lawmaker. Well, that comes in Isaiah 33:22. I'm sorry, Jeremiah 17:9. Jeremiah 17:9. That was the separation.
Hold on. Jeremiah 17:9. No, the reason I'm saying hold on because I'm putting it up so people can.
Okay. Awesome.
So people can see that
Very cool. All right.
And 6. Okay, I'm putting up all the scriptures she's giving that you guys.
Yep. Jeremiah 17:9 and
No, I got to put Ezekiel now and then Jeremiah.
okay, so Ezekiel 18:20. That was for attainder. The blood was not corrupted just because the father committed the crime.
And then Jeremiah, right?
Jeremiah 17:9. That was the basis for the separation of powers.
Okay.
This is for Bible study later. You guys can come back and challenge me next week.
I know, right?
All right.
17:9.
17:9. Yep. 3 branches of government came from Isaiah 33:22.
Okay, Isaiah 33.
Isaiah 33:22. Yeah.
See, I'm not a secretary. I can't go as fast as you.
What, you don't know shorthand?
I do know shorthand, but I don't know it on here. So
yeah. That's fine.
people will be like, what is that? What is that again? 33 and 22.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. Tax exemptions for churches without the 501c3 came from Ezra 7:24. I believe that was talking about the Levites and they were tax exempt, right? They had people give money to them, not they didn't have to give money into the treasury.
Right. Ezra, what'd you say?
Ezra 7:24.
7.
Yep.
And 24. Welcome to Bible class, y'all. And we're talking about the Constitution.
Yeah. And finally, republicanism. So the Republican form of government came from Exodus 18:21.
Okay. You said Exodus what?
Exodus 18:21.
18:21. All right. Yeah. Let me put that up here.
So they even found the how to do a Republican form of government from the Bible.
Exodus 18:21.
Yep.
Bam.
All right. So, given that the founders were very, very well instructed in the scriptures, when they wrote the Bill of Rights, it is not a long shot to believe that they fully understood that the rights of man came from God, and that rights come with, guess what? Duties, moral duties, or responsibilities, a word we don't use in this culture today. It's always everybody else's fault, right?
That's a cuss word.
It is a cuss word. So when they said you have the right to freedom of speech, they also spoke and wrote about you have a duty to use that right to speak the truth, right? When they said you have the right to keep and bear arms, well, you also have the duty not to shed innocent blood.
That's right.
Right? You have the right to assemble with whom you wish, but you have a duty to assemble peaceably and not discriminate based on immutable characteristics, right? So there are definitely there's a definite strong basis for the biblical principles that created or that gave them the inspiration to write these things. Another really interesting fact about this, every single right that was set down in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights, and in the Declaration of Independence, where did they get them from? Not just the Bible, but from the preachers in the pulpit. So prior to 1763, every single one of these rights had been preached about multiple times from multiple pulpits. The pastors were the ones who led the revolution. They led the writing of the documents that created our nation.
And, you know, that's when I found out that there was a slave owner who got saved. He accepted Jesus, and he freed all his slaves.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
keep on going, teacher.
I'm going. All right. So when we talk about the freedom of speech and all of that stuff, you know, they talk about, well, there's certain speech that you can't do, right? Well, yes, in a sense, right? So when we talk about libel and slander, when we talk about yelling fire in a crowded theater, right? The idea was based on, if you damaged my reputation, I had a right to regain that, because to them, reputation meant everything, right? Honor, duty, responsibility, all of those things came down. And if your good name was slandered, you had the right to fight back against that. So, Dr. Benjamin Rush, not a founder we hear about much, but he was a medical doctor. He was the first medical doctor who actually taught and tested Black doctors in America. He founded colleges. He founded Sunday school movement. He had a major hand in the spiritual formation of the nation, and also in the medical community. He actually really wanted to get medical rights put into our Bill of Rights, because as we're seeing now, that's actually a problem.
Big problem.
Yeah, we if we don't have autonomy over our bodies, then we don't have any other rights, right? So Dr. Benjamin Rush was one of those people. Well, he was slandered in the newspapers. He was slandered by many people who wanted to rip into his reputation, and he took them to court for it, and he won. Nowadays, when we take somebody to court for libel and slander, we take them for every cent they've got, because it's a monetary thing. It's no longer about reputation. So back then he won, and he won his reputation back. It didn't matter about monetary damages or emotional damages. It mattered that I want my good name back, right? Thomas Jefferson was slandered multiple times, but he stayed silent. He didn't take them to court. And so now, decades later, we have a Thomas Jefferson who's kind of seen as a bit of a bad guy in our history, when in fact his reputation was far, far better. But because it was slandered and he never fought back, we now see him as a philanderer, as an adulterer, as all of these nasty things. But Thomas Jefferson was actually a very godly man. He fought his entire life to free slaves. He paid his own slaves for their work at cost to himself. He was in debt till the end, till his death. And he did his absolute best to try to free his own slaves, but Virginia law made that next to impossible for him. He did end up, on his death, he was able to, it was a form of freedom. It was complicated, but regardless, he spent his entire life fighting against slavery. But we only see him as the evil slave owner who raped a slave girl and got her pregnant. That's not even true. That was slander and libel that was thrown at him. And because he didn't fight back and win in court, he was not able to gain his reputation back. And now we use that against him today. But yeah, so much of this had to do with duty and responsibility. If you are going to utilize your God-given rights, you have the duty and the responsibility to use them wisely. Nowadays, we have freedom without restraint. And that was never the intent of the founding fathers. They never intended free speech to be us going up and down the streets, cussing out our neighbors and screaming at one another and lying about those domestic terrorist parents in the school, right? It always came with responsibility. So that's a very sad thing, because we divorced the Constitution, the Declaration, we divorced our nation from God, and therefore we have no foundation for the principles that created this nation, and therefore we have no explanation for how to combat that. So,
when you say it like that, what we have done is evicted God from this country. And you say, well, we got all these churches. Yeah, but you don't see the move of God in this country like you will see somewhere else. And why? Because we told God, just like we told Great Britain, we want to be independent. So we don't need you right now.
We want to
And
be our own God.
yes. And
Yep.
so when we look at it, and when you went back and you talked about reputations,
Yeah.
that's why there was always a gunfight, because you called him a cheater. So
Oh yeah.
you had to go out to the streets.
Duels for honor. Yeah.
Yeah. And you didn't go to jail because you had a duel, because you know, my reputation was at stake. He called me a cheater.
Yeah.
Now we got to fight. You know, you called me a liar. You know,
Yeah.
you called me a thief. Now you don't mess up my reputation. So now
Yeah.
we got to deal with this.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yeah, and it's a very sad space to be in, understanding the intent of the founders, and that's something we have to go back to. One, we cannot judge them in a 21st century model, right? They came from their own, we need to judge them based on their own time period. Like when it says Noah was a righteous man in his time, we have to do that with the founders. Many of them were righteous men in their time, and they were far ahead of many of the people today who are returning racism to America, who are throwing Molotov cocktails and damaging property today, right? The founding fathers had a deep and abiding understanding of God, of who God was, and his divine hand on everything. And so everything that they did was based out of that, because they lived it out. It wasn't just a part of their life, it was their life, right? Going to church to them wasn't just a rote thing that they did because it's tradition and they're Christians and so that's that. They went to church because they knew that the community, the body of Christ, had a duty to serve one another, to be discipled, to go out into the world and make disciples of every nation. And where else could you get that except by sitting in front of the pulpit and hearing the preacher preach, right? And giving you conviction and the courage, the mental fortitude to go out into the world and preach the gospel. So these founding fathers, we vilified them so very much. And if you go back and you read their writings, I have writings on from Jefferson and Washington and Franklin, and oh gosh, who else do I have? Looking at all of my books, several other. My next one is I wanting to get the writings of Benjamin Rush. But these men, they could ad lib a speech with dozens of scriptural references in them because they knew the Bible by heart. They understood it. They understood its principles. Did they live it out perfectly? No, obviously not. And I don't ever want anybody to think that because I love the founding era so much that I'm idolizing these men. They were men, they were human, and they were very fallible men. But they also understood that they had that they acknowledged their sin, right? Alexander Hamilton had an affair on his wife, and he knowing he would lose his political influence and his ability to run for office, he made a public confession of that. And it was a pretty painful confession. And he published it in the papers. He lost his ability to run for president because there would be no one who would trust him in office after that. But but he did it because he understood that was his responsibility. Let's see. Now, I don't agree with everything Hamilton had to say, right? But I did understand that was one thing he did right. He confessed and he made it a public confession. So it's the 1800 election. Both Jefferson and Adams had no problem with their media surrogates trashing the other. Adams was called a hermaphrodite. Okay, so I would push back on that a little bit. Because yes, there was a period of time where Jefferson and Adams were both they lost their friendship for a while. They had some pretty bad falling out, and they did battle it out in the elections. But I would ask that we be careful saying that they had no problem with their surrogates trashing each other. Because we, like the man who went and shot up the congressional baseball in the name of Bernie Sanders. We cannot hold Bernie Sanders responsible for other people's speech or other people's actions, right? So Bernie Sanders said some things. Some guy took it to the extreme and shot up the Republican congressional baseball team, right? But that did not mean that Bernie Sanders was the one who pulled that trigger. And I don't like Bernie Sanders. So when we say that they had no problems with the media surrogates trashing one another, we're taking the responsibility away from those individual people who trashed the other candidate, and we're putting that responsibility on Jefferson and Adams. Not aware that the comments were publicly disavowed. So you're saying, if I'm clear on this, you're saying that because Jefferson and Adams did not publicly disavow those comments, that they supported it and they had no problem with it. Then we get into a question about the freedom of the press. Because the press can say a lot of stuff, and candidates don't always disavow what the press says, but neither does that mean they support it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but and I understand, because let's take this election that we just went through, right?
Yep.
Some people had a problem because Jonathan Wickman was calling them the Dream Team with Tim Ramthun, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But Tim Ramthun never came out publicly and says, I'm not part of a Dream Team. And he never came out publicly and said, I was part of the Dream Team. So you had people who was upset because he didn't come out publicly and says, I'm not part of that.
Disavow it, yeah.
So only one can do is assume that he was a part of it.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
let me
and then so in a sense, we're getting into the internal thoughts of people long gone. And so I'm not going to say that they supported or didn't support it. But I do want to be careful with saying that that they had no problem with it, because there was a lot of things that they didn't say publicly. Like I said, Thomas Jefferson was slandered left and right throughout his whole career. No, yeah, I know. I'm not. I'm like, for my sake, or for my part, I just want to be careful with saying that there was a that there's a tacit support because somebody says or doesn't say something, right, against a situation. So in this situation with Jefferson and Adams, do we know for sure that they supported or didn't support the media bashing the other candidate? I don't know. I do know one thing I do know, and it was factual. They did have a falling out. It took many years for them to get back together, and on the advice of friends, they reached out to one another, and they did clear up whatever was between them. So that was a part of their life. Even back then, the elections were vitriolic things on many occasions. There were a lot of supporters on both sides who said and did things that neither of the candidates would have been supportive of, given their own character. but yeah, there's a lot of question there. So yeah, so I wouldn't say that they supported it or didn't support it at this point.
So let me play the advocate for a second.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's me, the troublemaker. Uh, so can we say that they didn't come publicly? And this is just hypothetically, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That they didn't come publicly because even though they didn't support it, they didn't want to say they didn't support it because they thought they was going to lose supporters, or if they said one way or the other. Because it's like when the people talking says, "Oh, I remember when uh, the campaign first started, and they was calling a Patriot group, and it was like, this is the Patriot team, and
Mm-hmm.
the Patriot candidates, and it was like uh, David King, Jonathan Wickman, Justin Smicka, and Jeanette at the time. And I came out and said, no, I'm not part of a team. I'm my own man. I had to come out like that because not saying that they are bad people, but
Mm-hmm.
it's who I am and my character. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So do you think that they might have not said anything because they didn't want to lose support? Because a lot of candidates don't agree with some of their supporters the same, but what do? They don't say anything.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's the thing that we need to look at. So John Adams kind of went a little bit he was very much for centralizing the federal government. And Jefferson was very much against that. He wanted to keep the government small. And so when when Jefferson got into office, now I'm trying to remember how it worked. Hold on, give me 1 second and let me let me figure it out. So John Adams, before he left office, he did some pretty damaging things in order to stymie Jefferson's slowing down of the growth of the federal government. So there was already a lot of stuff going on, and he had, John Adams basically had a campaign going to make it as difficult as possible for Jefferson to do his job, because John Adams did not want the federal government to grow smaller. And there was more to it than that, but he really did a number on Jefferson when Jefferson got into office. So so they became adversaries for a very long time, and it was actually Dr. Benjamin Rush who his dream was to reconcile them, and he got them reconciled. So, but yeah, anyway, yes, a lot of candidates don't say anything because they're cowards. That is true. I would say that the founding fathers were probably not under the cowardly.
No,
cowardly. I wouldn't define them as cowardly. But there was a certain. They were very passionate, and so they did a lot of things from a place of wanting to see a lot of change happen. And so so they were they fought duels. Obviously we have Aaron Burr and Hamilton. And both of them were in politics. We have several of them who were challenged on many occasions based on their belief systems and everything. They had dinner parties where they would just be going at it. And it was very difficult to remain civil. You have George Washington writing his books, his rules for civility, right? And he struggled to keep those rules. So So again, we've got to take them in the era in which they lived, and their ideas, their definitions of duty and honor were a whole lot different from what we have now. So the candidates today, I could definitely say many of them are cowards, and they don't speak the truth. But it wasn't that the founding fathers struggled with speaking the truth. It was that they struggled with having a different opinion of what an America was supposed to look like, and a lot of their vitriol and argumentation came from that. It wasn't an argument over what was true; it was over how to implement that.
Can you imagine if we today was in the time of the founding fathers?
Yeah.
The primary would have been bloody.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't have a primary. We'd just go straight to the election. Can you imagine if like we had Tony Evers as governor and you as lieutenant governor? I mean, that's how it would have been. We would have had
he would have
party as governor and one party as
he would have had a heart attack. I would have given him a heart attack. But
so, yeah.
But you know, it's just funny to think about if we was back then and one of the candidates said something negative about another one. Oh, it's a duel.
Oh yeah.
It wouldn't have been. It wouldn't have been
knockdown dragouts on the congressional floor.
I know.
I'm trying to remember who it was. I don't think it was the first Congress, but in one of the congressional meetings, they had somebody literally cross the floor to the other side and just like whip a guy with his cane until he got knocked unconscious. He got dragged out and punished for it. But yeah, I mean, that was an ongoing thing. There was, if your honor was called into question, you did not leave that sitting. Yeah. So, I mean, there were some examples. Like I said, Thomas Jefferson did not, and I think he should have. I think he should have fought back to get his honor restored, but I think his thing was that he was a very private individual. He didn't like to battle against people like that, and he didn't find a use for it. He had too many other things to do. So
it would have been 10 paces.
10 paces, yep. Constitutioncenter.org. Yeah.
But you know, I think that when we look at it, you know, the principles never change, no matter what age, what time, what decade we're in. The principles is the principles, no matter what. And so, if you know, time will change, but the principles aren't supposed to change because time changed.
Yep.
Oh yeah, it would have been a bloodbath. I could just see it now, people shooting each other. You're lying on me, pow.
Yeah, and it's interesting because obviously John Adams was the second president, so they didn't have any precedent for what an actual battle was because everybody wanted Washington to be the leader, right? Nobody contested it. I mean, it was across the board. He was voted in. And so, yeah, so then we have the second election, and all of a sudden we've got an actual battle on our hands. And it really was it was between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. And like I said, Adams kind of went away from the original intent. Even that early, he was definitely more of he wanted more power to be centralized. Him and Madison argued, I believe even maybe Hamilton argued for bringing the monarchy back. They're like, oh, we tried this a few years. Let's try the monarchy. We need that again. So yeah, it was an interesting concept. But I think, I mean, one of the important things to remember is John Adams and Jefferson did make amends. They did heal their friendship, and they spent the rest of their life. They even died on the same exact day, July 4th. So they did manage to heal that wound that was inflicted. They understood the importance of redemption and forgiveness. So yeah, again, their duty, their God-given rights, they also had the duty to treat them responsibly. So yeah, I had one more thing that I wanted to say on rights violations, but I don't know if this is the right place to put it.
Might as well go for it.
All right. So I was one of the other things that I was going to discuss was this issue of voting. The founding fathers never considered voting a right. To them, it was a duty, right? So that was their responsibility as the rights as citizens. They had a duty to preserve their rights as citizens. They had a duty to vote in the correct people, right? And so now we have hardened criminals in certain states who are allowed to vote. And the founding fathers would be rolling over in their graves right now because they were so, rights and duties were so intermingled that if you violated another's right by murder or by thievery or by taking property from others, by whatever that right was that you violated, then you lost your right to decide self-government, right? You lost your right to choose leaders who would limit government. And when you committed crimes, they considered you not morally upright enough to deserve those duties. So yeah, nowadays we have a completely different view of what rights are. And we've redefined rights. If it's not universal across the human race, then like life, right? We have the right to life. That's a universal right. If it's not universal, it's not a right. So yeah, it's just an interesting idea. And I know I was going to finish up talking about the First Amendment today. But I don't know. I really, as I was writing my notes and everything, I really just wanted to come back to this. There's a lot of talk, and I've heard it on both sides. There's a lot of people who are like, give me my arms, I'm going to go to war over what's going on in America. And then there's others who are, accusing parents of being domestic terrorists and, all of these things. Or demanding that we tolerate and accept their desire to be a furry creature one day and a different biological sex the next day, and so we're seeing both sides of this, and we're seeing how divided it's getting. But I just wanted to reiterate that this is not the first time America has ever been in a crisis. It's not the first time we've ever fought a civil war. And I'm not saying even just with guns. We've fought even just at the beginning of the constitutional creation. People fought on both sides of wanting more government and wanting less, of wanting our rights written down and not wanting them written down. There's a lot that we need to take into consideration before we march off to war. And I'm not saying it's not inevitable. I'm not saying that it's not going to happen. We are in a crisis point, and it will reach a breaking point. It will reach either a freedom shift or a force shift. And I pray that we reach a freedom shift, and I pray that we don't have to send our children and grandchildren off to war. But yeah, when, there is a group of people who are all for picking up their guns and taking down the government. And while that may may be an option. The people who fought for American freedom were not the first ones to take up arms. It was the British who fought against us. Now, we can get into a discussion on whose shot fired first, but the British marched on the town, and the town rose up to meet them. So we did not want to go to war, but we did so because we knew we had a righteous cause. So yeah, this is something that I have a conversation with people about. That one, get yourself educated, figure out what our rights are, what our duties are. Learn our history so we won't be doomed to repeat it. And let's see if we can continue the experiment, not on accident and force, but gosh, how did it go? On reason. Let me find my book. Hold on. I got the Federalist Papers. Reason and reflection. That was the word. I keep forgetting that stinking word. Reason and reflection. As Alexander Hamilton in the Federalist Papers. See, this man who wrote the Federalist Papers talking about the limits of government, and then he became a monarchist. So yeah, it can happen. So anyway, he says, it has been frequently remarked that it seems to have been reserved to the people of this country by their conduct and example to decide the important question whether societies of men are really capable or not of establishing good government from reflection and choice, or whether they are forever destined to depend for their political constitutions on accident and force. That was Alexander Hamilton, Federalist Paper number 1. And he wrote that to justify the Constitution to the people of that day so that they would understand that we were trying something new based on time-honored, infallible principles, and on the protection of our God-given rights. And yeah, that's all I've got to say about that.
You know, a lot of people talking about picking up their guns and going to war. But so let's just say that happens, right? Mm-hmm. Then who's going to make the new rules and regulations? Are we going to go back to the Constitution then? Or are we, because most people say, yeah, I'm a constitutionalist, but they don't study it.
Yeah.
Okay, I read it, right? And I said this earlier before you came on. You got a lot of people that read the Bible, but they didn't study it. They don't
study it. Mm-hmm.
And the Bible says, study to show thyself approved unto God, not man. Don't try to read something and then want to quote me the scripture to make me think. He said, no, unto God, a workman that not need to be ashamed, but rightly dividing the word of truth. So you got people that saying, okay, let's do it, but then they don't understand the Constitution. They don't know that scriptures is in the Constitution. Yeah. That's, and when you was talking about Deuteronomy 6, mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it was Deuteronomy 6 that when Obama was president, that's what they was after. They was like, let us see your birth certificate, mm-hmm. because unless you are a brethren, you can't rule over us. Mm-hmm. So and people didn't even understand that because they might have read it, but they didn't understand where it come from.
Yep.
And those are the things that we have to do. We have to read and figure out where it come from. What was he saying in the midst of everything that he was saying? Why was and like you asked the question earlier, right? How many grievance was there?
Yeah.
And I answered it fast, but I guarantee you a lot of people don't even know that it was 27. They didn't know. They just thinking, oh, they just wanted no more taxation without representation.
Yeah.
Well, do they know when they started pushing taxation without representation? And you're the teacher, but I'm gonna ask that question. So y'all put in the comments, when did they start pushing taxation without representation? Because I tell you this, it wasn't even the top 10 of the grievance.
Nope. Nope.
So y'all tell us, when did they do that? Let's see if somebody's going to respond to that one. Let's see. Do we got any challengers? Don't Google it either. Okay. One says, I don't have no idea. Okay. The teacher's going to give y'all the answer in a minute.
Oh, I am, huh? I'm still trying to find it. It's been this one's I know I heard it once. This was a wall builders speaking. I'm trying to remember when they started. Oh gosh. Was it around the same time that they started taking God out of the schools and started secularizing it?
It was, now you're making me to miss my dates up. It was 1920 or 1930s is when they did it.
That sounds about right.
And that's when they moved God out the way and started putting taxation without representation.
Yep.
And so, and we gotta, and the funny thing about it is, a lot of people don't even know the true meaning of the Black Road Regiment.
Mm-hmm.
They like, wait, what? The Black Road what?
Yeah.
And they think you're talking about a black person.
Yeah.
But
yeah, no, it was so the as we started to secularize the nation, we started taking this stuff out of history.
yeah,
Woodrow Wilson, most of the history books we are utilizing today comes from Woodrow Wilson's. It was several volumes worth of history. He wrote Black people out of history in America.
Yeah.
And when he put them back in, he actually in the original history books, you can see the drawings of Black people were made to look like apes.
Yep.
And he took out the pastor, the major, what is his name? One of the pastors who had an all-white congregation in the early 1700s. He took out stories about Harry Hoosier. Why is Indiana called the Hoosier State?
When isn't it Rainey?
What?
Wasn't the preacher last name Rainey?
That sounds right. Yeah, that sounds right.
See, with all this, now it's all in my head.
I know, there's so much of it.
Yeah, but you're right. And here's the thing about it that really freaks me out, right?
Yeah.
What's the painter name? The painter. Is it Michelangelo? Was it Michelangelo?
Michelangelo?
Who painted the white Jesus with the I'm trying to think of his name. But he painted one of his family members as Jesus.
Okay.
And if you go to Polish Catholic churches, you will see a black or brown skin, dark skin Mother Mary and a dark skinned baby Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
In their stained glass windows and everything that they have. And people looking at like, wait a minute, hold on, where is that? How you got this in a Polish Catholic church, but then you have this? Because what we allow people to do is we allow them to just change things the way they want it to be. And with now our children don't know how to write in cursive. They don't know how to read in cursive. So now they can change some more.
Yep.
And people don't realize that this is why you got to study, you got to do research so you'll know for yourself, what's really going on, because if and thank God that this part of the election is over, because if I heard one more person use honey as the Second Amendment, I probably would have shot them by then.
Hunting. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Don't get me started on that.
And I'm sitting
Yeah.
there like, oh my God, did they just say that again? And people are, because the people don't read, they thinking hunting is part of the Second Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting
Yes.
there like, oh my God, what is wrong? Next
Yeah.
person show me some orange. If they show me orange in the Second Amendment in the
Yeah.
same thing, I
Yeah.
probably would snap.
I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna pull my hair out. Jeez. Yeah, no, it's so funny because who was it that said yes, they wrote the Second Amendment because the founding fathers just got home from a massive hunting experience, not from fighting in the Revolutionary War. That's why they did it. It's just, yeah, it's so, I mean, again, we're taking these people out of their timeline, out of their context, and we're putting our own biases and our own thoughts on it. There was a history book that when they started doing history books for textbooks in the schools, oh gosh, I think this was in the 70s possibly, the authors of it, somebody commented, hey, there's no footnotes in the history book, they don't have any references. And they actually wrote a note in their forward or something that they decided to do away with footnotes and references in a history book. So they got all of their references from other history authors who wrote about history, who referenced other history authors who wrote about history. So not the people who wrote their own history. They didn't take their references from Thomas Jefferson's letters or George Washington's writings. They took it from other modern authors who decided to dispense with their own footnotes and references. So that's where we're getting our history from authors who won't even cite their sources. So you don't even have the ability to go back and say, hey, is this true? Well, yeah, you do. You just have to go back into the original writings and find it.
Exactly. And that's and it's so funny that you put it like that, because you got these people saying I'm an expert, and then I'll be like, are you?
No.
And I'm an expert. I took I'm a history major. Okay, then tell me, Winthrop Cheswell, who is he?
Yeah.
I don't think I heard that name. How you a history major and you don't know that name?
Yeah. Do you know why? Do you know why Indiana was named the Hoosier State? It wasn't because of basketball. It had nothing to do with sports.
Right.
It had everything to do with a black preacher who was considered by the founding fathers to be one of the greatest orators in history. That's up with George Whitefield and all of these other people who spoke well. Who was the Greek one? Oh gosh, not Pliny. What was his name? I don't know. Anyway, one of the Greek orators, these people who have epics written about them. And Harry Hoosier was considered the greatest orator in history. He could make grown men cry because they felt the conviction in their souls because of his preaching. And
that's like, people don't understand the true story about St. Patrick's Day.
No.
It was about him taking the gospel. It wasn't about green beer.
Oh, come on. Don't take my Guinness from me. I know. St. Patrick, I mean, all of these people, we do not understand our history. We do not read it. And people will say, I don't have time to sit and read all of these books. Well, you know what? I am a mother of 5. I am a homeschool mom, and I have a 4 large bookcases with autobiographies and letters and history books and things, and I'm working my way through it. My goal one day when my kids are grown and gone is to sit down for an entire year and read 400 books on philosophy and theology and history and whatever other subject floats my boat that year. That's my goal, and it's a priority for me because I want to learn my past so that I can understand my present and plan for my future.
Exactly. And the thing about it is when we really begin to look and study and understand, I remember the day I was sitting in my church and God told me, study the country, study
Mm,
government. And I began to study it and I didn't understand. And when I started studying, I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. Am I the only one see this?
mm,
You know, I'm like, hold
yeah.
on. What's really going on? Am I the only one? I can't be the only one to see what they're doing. And
No.
so all the way back to who was it? I think it was Samuel Adams who put the whole state on the fast.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'm like, wow, they was putting the whole state on. This is
They
how.
call, yeah, I mean, they had, was it 1400 prayer and proclamation days before the 1860, I believe. 1400, and these were from people in Congress, these were presidents,
Yeah,
these were, I mean, judges. They had prayer and proclamation. There were governors who put these out. They had a strong faith in God, in divine providence, and even today the secularists say, well, when they say divine providence, it was just a general idea of a godly being, but it was this deistic view in which this God created the universe and then just kind of left it to run on its own. That is not what is that first part? God governs in the affairs of men. That was
right.
Benjamin Franklin, the guy who refused to have a personal relationship with Christ, but was best friends with George Whitefield, the father of the Great Awakening. So
And
he even understood God governs in the affairs of men. This is not something that we can separate out from our day-to-day living. We have to centralize God, our divine creator. We have to centralize him, because guess what? We cannot live in this world without him. Even if we refuse to acknowledge his presence, he is there. He is the creator. He
yeah,
created us, which means that we cannot live this life except on his say so.
and not only that, God's principles make sense.
They do. It is common sense, which unfortunately we're lacking a lot nowadays.
So so even though they wasn't serving God, his principles made sense.
Yes,
So I'm
exactly.
gonna go along with the principle. I'm not serving him, but I'm going along with his principles because
Yes,
they make a lot of sense.
exactly. Exactly.
And now you got these so-called rocket scientists trying to create this new way of living and a new way of doing things,
Yeah.
and now they call experts. I call them they are experts of screw ups.
Experts at making mistakes.
That's because they don't know. And the thing about it is they spend millions of dollars on research, right?
Yep.
So why don't they spend millions of dollars on research on how we became a great nation, and let's implement that?
It's
And
probably better than spending millions of dollars on figuring out how drunk rats do on a treadmill. That's an actual study. I'm not joking. We're That's what we're spending our money on, guys. We're
well,
spending money in Pakistan giving females bank accounts because God forbid because the women in Pakistan can't have bank accounts without their husband's names on it. So we're doing gender studies in Pakistan to supposedly help these women get bank accounts. What does that have to do with furthering the kingdom of Christ, and two, furthering freedom? Throwing money at a problem is not going to fix it. And
no.
what does drunk rats on a treadmill have to do with preserving our freedom, or making us healthy as a nation? Just a thought.
I know. And when you look at it, you sit there and you be like, okay, why they doing that? That's stupid. You
Yeah.
know, and you went to, one of my mentors, Miles Monroe, was a phenomenal man. May he rest in peace. But
Mm,
Miles Monroe was like, I would not allow a piece of paper or even a test to define who I am or how smart I am.
Yeah.
And he said, I might have took a test in on the day I had a bad day,
Mhm.
and I might have made a D. That D is not who I am.
Yep.
So I'm not going to let your test, your piece of paper define who I am.
Yeah.
Only the word of God will define who I am.
Yep.
And if everybody would just go back to who God said they are,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of this stuff wouldn't even go on.
Because our identity cannot come from inside of us. It has to come from an external source. And where are we getting our identity from, if not from the God who made us?
Right.
It's why we have so much depression and suicide. It's why we have a nihilism in our nation, in our culture. It's why we have this idea that we can be anything we want to be, including a furry cat who poops in the hallway in our high school, right? Like these concepts come from the fact that we are being told by our teachers, by parents, by government officials that, one, you can be anything you want to be, and two, you get to decide your truth. Well,
Right.
if you look back in history, you will see that every time somebody tries to define truth outside of godly principles, outside of God's view of the universe, we fail. And not only do we fail, but millions of people die because of it.
Yes. And that is why we have a high suicide rate, because we have people making a permanent decision on a temporary problem.
Yep.
And so, or there's a lot of pressure, like and God rest her soul, and I'm praying for her family, the anchor news lady who committed suicide.
Mm.
You know, you in a public eye,
Yep.
but you act like you had to have this image of
Yeah.
being something that you really not.
Yeah.
And you don't really know who you are, because you're too busy trying to be something that somebody else wants you to be.
Yeah.
That's why I always told people, what you see is what you get. You ain't changing me. Either
Yeah.
accept it or move on.
Yeah.
You know, and
Yeah,
I
we don't have a strong definition for the word integrity anymore. It meant you were the same person in public as you were in private. It meant that you held to your same principles no matter whether people could see you or not.
Yeah.
Where do we see that in political office anymore? Where do we see that even in the people who are the advisors for political candidates, right? Who are like, okay, well, don't talk about that, or do say that, do talk about that. And then once you're in office, then you can talk about other things, right? Then
Right.
you can, spill your guts about what your beliefs are because you're already in office, right? Unless, of course, you want to rerun for office, and then, of course, you need to just not talk about it at all, right?
Exactly. And so, and the thing about it is, I believe the word of God, and I stand totally on the word of God.
Yeah.
And there's a scripture that I teach everybody about, and it's in Genesis chapter 12, verse 2 and 3. And it says this, and I put my name in it, and I tell everybody to put their name in there. And this is what it says. And I'll make of David a great nation, and I will bless David with abundant increase of favors. And I will make David's name famous and distinguished. And David shall be a blessing, dispensing goods to others. And I will bless those who bless David, who confer prosperity and happiness upon David. And I will curse him who curse or use insolent language towards David. And in David shall all the families and kindreds of the earth be blessed. And by David they shall bless themselves. Now, I take that first part, I will make David a great nation. So guess what David go around and say? I'm great. I'm not great because of my situation I'm in. I'm great. I could be going through hell and high water. I'm still great. I could be on the mountaintop. I'm still great. I can have plenty. I can have everything I want in life. I'm still great. I can not have everything I want in life, but guess what? I'm still great. So in order to walk in that integrity, I had to come to the conclusion, no matter what I'm going through, I'm still great.
Mm.
No matter what anybody think about me. I tell people all the time, if you don't like me, that's your business, and I'm not going to get in your business. But to me, I'm great, and I'm 6'4" and sexy. That's all y'all need to know. That's what I tell people. That's me.
Mm.
Wait on me.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mm. I'll have to put that book on my to read list.
What book?
The book he just who was that? Who said the book titled "I Am Who I Am"?
Oh, that's the book she's writing.
He's writing. Okay.
Just make sure you put why is it important to stand in the middle from a kingdom perspective on your list to read.
Oh yeah, I've got a. I think you've got my copy earmarked.
Yes.
Awesome.
So yeah. So we, so when we look at it, right, and we go back and can you imagine if we go back and just teach people who they are in the eyesight of God?
Yeah, the value you get from that.
Yes. And so, so we got a lot of educating to do. I'm so glad that Dur says she's learning from us. I love when people tell us they learning.
Yeah, it's so cool.
I'm like, okay, then even if one person is learning, we did our job, And so, but it's very important to get it out there to let people know the intent, the purpose. Because if we don't understand the purpose, that's just like a marriage. If a marriage has no purpose, they'll give up real quick. But if they have a purpose why they marry, then they're gonna stay in there, and no matter how hard it get, how tough it get, because of that purpose, they're gonna go through.
Yep, exactly.
So let's see. Oh, it's already 2 hours and 12 minutes. Okay, let's see what she said.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Cool. And the thing about it is getting America to be fixed is we got to go back to the manual. And the Constitution and the other Constitution. There are two constitutions. There's a Constitution for the United States, and then there's the Constitution, which is the Word of God. We have to go back to the manuals and do it the way the manual told us to do it.
Well, and you can't have one without the other. I mean,
That's it.
I think that is ultimately what the founding fathers were trying to emphasize was that you cannot. The Constitution is a worthless piece of paper without the foundational principles of the scriptures to back them up, right? You cannot. It was wholly inadequate for any other than a moral and upright people. They understood that if you don't have moral standard outside of yourself, if you don't have a foundational principle in the Word of God, then the Constitution really is just a dusty, dirty parchment locked under a glass case in a museum somewhere, and it means nothing.
I like the way you say it, somewhere.
Yeah, because I mean, think about it. We have this idea that or the politicians nowadays believe that they are following the Constitution, right? Well, what Constitution are they following? Obviously not the Word of God.
Right.
Definitely not that 4,000 word document under glass in the museum. It's this bloated, awful book that's 5,000 pages long and growing every year. And it says Constitution on it. But here we put in our own addendums that have nothing to do with the actual Constitution and the actual principles that backed it up. And yeah, it's sad, but it's also hopeful that people are listening to and understanding that there is a godly history that we have to understand. There is a standard constitution that should be for every Christ follower that we need to follow first, and that when God comes first, our country will thrive. When my people pray, right? If my people pray,
Yes.
they repent, if they turn from their wicked ways,
yes,
and turn back to me, I will heal their land. I will restore what the locusts have stolen. I know I'm kind of mixing and matching some of the verses, but the idea is that
right.
when we turn back to God, we will be restored.
And the thing about it is, and I mean, you quoted 2 Chronicles 7:14, but there's something in there that we have to make sure we understand, right? If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked way. Even God said, even my people have wicked ways, you know? So he said, and he says, but then will I hear? I'm not going to hear until you turn.
Yep.
You know, we want God to hear, but we don't want to turn.
Yep.
You know, we want God to hear the cry of his people right now.
Yeah.
Ooh, see, now I'm going to get into the book, right?
Yep, exactly.
Isn't
that what Josiah did when they found the book in the temple? He immediately stopped everything, and they did days of fasting and prayer, and they read from cover to cover that sacred book.
Yes.
And they repented, and they turned back, and his kingdom prospered. His kingdom thrived because it was a kingdom under God's rule.
Oh, yes. And that's why chapter 4 of the book, I'm just going to give you a nitbit. It says, oh, Lord, I don't want to misquote it, but it says, we can turn it around if we conduct the Exodus.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's what's going to have to happen. Our loyalty has to go back to God, not a party. You know, not a party. It has to go back to God. And we have to go back to standing on the principles and the word of God. And we have to go back to asking God to forgive us and return to our first love. Then God can do what he wants to do for us. But until then, we can sit there and cry all day long, God fix the nation, but then go back to be loyal to a party.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And so we just got, I mean, we got some work to do, and that's why I'm so glad we're doing these classes and everything, because now you talking about reading 400 books. I got to learn to sit still to read 400 books.
Oh, sitting still is not my problem. Probably getting up and moving is more of a problem for me.
Mine is sitting still, you know, and even with my motivational things that I listen to on a daily basis and everything, I still be like, okay, all right, I need to do this. I need to do it. But then every time I get a revelation, I'm like, oh my God, God, really? You know, I just thought I was going to sit still for a minute.
Nope, not this time.
No. And that's why the school is getting ready to be open. I'm looking forward to it, but it won't be open until August, the beginning of the school year 2023. So but
cool.
Kingdom Ecclesia Academy is going to be amazing school.
Nice.
Training agents of change.
Awesome.
So you wanna hit us with something else real quick?
Do I want to hit you with something else? Let me think. Hold on. I've got a few things I could say.
Always, right?
I don't have a problem with talking. Let's see. Where am I? George Washington, in his farewell address, said this: of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equally with the pious man, ought to respect and to cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connection with private and public felicity. Let it be simply asked, where is the security for property, for reputation, for life, if the sense of religious obligation desert the oaths which are the instruments of investigation in court of justice? And let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded to the influence of refined education on minds of peculiar structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principles.
Wow. You want to expound on that?
Well, I mean, it speaks for itself.
Yeah.
I don't know. Can I expound on George Washington? That feels a little bit boastful there. So basically, there are a lot of words in there that we don't hear very often. Basically, George Washington was saying, if you expect America to survive and thrive without religion and morality put together, because you can have moral people, because every person is made in the image of God, right? So an atheist can be a moral person, but where does he derive his morality from? And if you take religion, if you take Christianity, and that was the religion he was talking about, you take Christianity out of public and private life, and you just say, well, I can be a moral person without it, you will very quickly come to lose your freedoms, your rights, your all of the things that make America great, because it was founded on religious and moral principles, and you cannot divorce those two concepts. I'm not saying that an atheist can't be a moral person. What I am saying is that he is borrowing a moral standard from the very God that he rejects.
Oh yes, all the time. and I heard one of the founding fathers say, and I don't want to chop up his quote, but I'm just going to paraphrase it. He says, if I got to go to heaven by a political party, then I don't want to go.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Yeah. There was a pastor that I listened to a few years back, and he said, this is God's universe, and God can make the rules and do anything that he wants to in his universe. If you may not like it, and you may decide you want to do something different, but you've got to go get your own universe then.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So when we think about it, I heard a preacher say one time that there was a scientist, and he was having a conversation with God that he can.
I think I know where this is going.
That he can create anything.
Yeah.
And God said, "Okay, go ahead and create it."
Mm-hmm.
And so, he went to grab some dirt. God said, I created that."
Yep. Go get your own dirt.
Right. And then he tried to go get something else, and God said, I created that. Yeah. Create. If you're like me, then create something without nothing.
Yeah.
Because I created all of this without anything.
Yeah.
Now let me see you do that.
Yeah.
And sometimes doctors and scientists think they are God.
Mm-hmm.
Now we got the politicians who think they are God. And so when are we going to allow God to be God back in this country?
Yeah. Yeah.
And and that's just something. Oh, did you see the latest with the hold on, because I sent it to some people. I don't know if I sent it to you.
Okay.
But
You can poke your head in. That's okay. My son's been listening in.
Hey, I hear you. I heard you anyway. Where is it? I sent it to a pastor because I told him you have to pay attention to this.
Mm-hmm.
See, that's my problem. I be sending information to everybody. Where is it?
I'm gonna post a link. The AmericanVision.org is a really interesting place. It talks about the author. He's an author, Gary DeMar. He wrote a book called God and Government. And he talks about Christians getting involved politically and basically advancing the kingdom and all of that stuff. And so he's got some really great articles, but I read one just recently called Democracy Means Submission to Democrat Rule. And that, goes back to the idea of democracy being what everybody, including Republicans, say that we are. And this idea of mob rule and submitting to what essentially ends up being the majority. And when the majority is loud and dangerous, they can destroy every freedom we've got. So.
Oh yeah, it's about the DPI and what they're doing with what they're doing to the preschoolers.
Okay, in Wisconsin.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me see.
It doesn't have to do with a book called what is it? I Am a Tree or something like that.
Oh no, this one is dealing with the gender of the children again.
Okay.
And I'm putting it in your. I put it in your inbox so you can take a look at it. But we have to, as parents, as believers, as individuals that got some more standards, we have to stand up now than ever before to fight these people. That is really, really messing up our children.
Oh yeah, for sure.
So.
Oh, it says the attachment's unavailable.
Oh, they done took it down already.
Oh no. I did see, where was this? In Cook County. Cook County, that is in Illinois.
Yeah.
48 Cook County school districts will not be teaching the new sex education curriculum. 48 Cook County school districts opted out.
All right.
So people are standing up. They are listening.
Only except for Milwaukee. Milwaukee ain't opened up their mouth yet.
Well, yeah, not everywhere. Gender expansion resources. Is that what you were talking about? The DPI?
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Great. It's wonderful.
I know, right? So, we just got a lot of work to do. We're going to keep educating people so that we can move forward.
Yeah.
Couple of things before I let her say her final goodbyes. We have Saturday, September 24th is the book signing for those of you guys that want to come. We got people that's coming all the way from Eau Claire to the book signing. So we want to invite everybody in the state that want to come down. Go to my page and you'll see the flyer. The address is 4030 North 34th Street in Milwaukee. Saturday from 3 to 5. Some people talking about they want to go eat afterwards. And I thought about bringing food there, but we'll see. Because they want to go to my favorite restaurant. So maybe we'll go to my favorite restaurant. But the book signing is going to be very good, very interesting. The cost is $15. That's the cost of the book, and it will be autographed. So you'll get my doctor's signature.
Is it legible, or is it more like oh gosh, which one was it that really had one of the founding fathers had a really illegible signature? I'm trying to remember.
Well, let me just put it like this. It's so legible you can see the D and the K, and that's it.
Speaking of, okay, this is funny. Speaking of the founding fathers, did you know that Benjamin Franklin, the founding fathers refused to allow him to write the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution because they were afraid he was going to put something funny in it, like a joke. They were afraid.
Really?
Yes, because he was a jokester. He was a prankster. He actually wrote to the Royal College of Great Britain, Royal College of London, I think, asking them to do a study on how to make human flatulence smell good.
Really?
Yes. So these were human people, right? They were not these gods up in the sky, and they were not evil, wicked, horrible individuals.
Well, you know what? Come to think about it, if I was there writing the Constitution, they wouldn't let me write it either, because they'll be like, "Oh no, not you. No, you can sign it, but no, you can't write it."
I would have been far too verbose. I think I would have written 50 words when I could have written with 10.
Right. They would have told me, "No, you can't do it, because we don't know what's going to." They already tell me they don't know what's going to come out my mouth, so they can't even imagine what I would put down there, you know.
Yeah. Oh, man.
I'll probably put in the Constitution, you have the right to slap anybody that do anything stupid. Everybody be walking down the street slapping each other. You'd be like, "Why are you doing that?"
Parents have a right to their own children.
I know, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of things I would have put in the Constitution other than what they put in. But obviously I'm coming at it from a 21st century hindsight. That's always 2020.
Yeah. And so we just got to defend it. Yes. and keep it and preserve it for our children and grandchildren.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
So is there anything you would like to say in your closing? Because you always got to do a closing.
A closing, yeah. I thought my George Washington farewell address was pretty good, but I will go with so read lots and lots of history. If you need recommendations, I can give you tons of recommendations. Don't read those textbooks they have in school, because I can guarantee you they do not tell the truth. And even when there are bits of truth in it, think of it as a steak with arsenic laced in it. It tastes good going down, but it is poison through and through. So read books like The Gulag Archipelago, read books like The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, read books like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, their letters, and they were copious writers. They wrote, prolific writers. They wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. They have autobiographies. They have letters that they've written back and forth to different people. We have the letters that Thomas Jefferson and John Adams wrote to one another to make amends after all of those years of vitriol and anger. So we have resources. They are out there. Thrift books is a great place to get them for really, really cheap. There are good history books that are written and cited over and over and over again by original source documents. Make the time, make it a priority to learn our history, to learn our Constitution, and not just read it once and be done with it. I think of that verse in James that talks about the man looking at himself in the mirror and then turning away and immediately forgetting what he looks like. And guess what? It's because he was looking at himself. He was not looking at the image of God in him and remembering it and recalling it to mind. We need to remember who we are and who we come from. And so when people tell you that this nation was secular from the beginning, that the founders were God haters and deists and whatever other names they want to throw out there, ask them where they're getting their sources from. And then tell them they need to actually look at the real stuff. And we've got plenty of that still. Fortunately, there's still people who preserve those documents. They're worth reading. I know I mentioned a couple congressional records. Go back and look at those congressional records. They are there in the Library of Congress. You can go back and you can type in the date and read through all of those things. If we only knew our history, Rustin, we would hopefully finally not repeat it. But that's what I encourage you to do. And if a homeschool mom of 5 with major health issues can do it, I guarantee you anybody else can. So love you all. Thank you for joining us, for listening in, for your back and forth conversations with us, for engaging. It's so wonderful to be here. And yeah, thank you, Dr. King, for allowing me this time, because I love it.
Oh, well, you're more than welcome. And I just want to say, you guys, we gave you guys a lot of scriptures that's inside the Constitution.
Yep.
Go back and look at it, and and study it. No, you guys gotta know it, you
Yep.
know. And so we have, this is what this is about: empowering you guys, empowering you to know and understand and to look. And I'm even learning, because some things I thought I knew and I didn't know. I had half truth. So, and the thing about it that I love is that I learned more about the history of this country when I left school than I did.
Yeah. I know, I was homeschooled and I still learn more when I started reading it for myself. We use history textbooks, but yeah.
I know, right? You're sitting there like, wait a minute, I learned all this, something ain't right with this, but
isn't that the whole point of education? We're not educated by others. We educate ourselves, right?
Right.
I can't educate my children. I can teach, I can inspire, I can point them to resources, but my children have to be willing to learn, or they will not learn.
That's right.
And that's literally what we are doing. We're giving you stuff, we're giving you resources, we're giving you tools, but you guys need to take responsibility for your own education, because I guarantee you, if you spend any amount of time in this, you will see a lot of things that we missed. And I'm obviously not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. So I am still learning as I go, as I teach. I'm still learning new things and new experiences and exploring different aspects of it. So just let your life be a lifelong learning process.
Yes. Amen to that. So we want you guys to know that we love y'all. We appreciate everybody coming on. We'll be back Thursday. We didn't have a class last Thursday because my grandson, it was senior day, and I was honored and blessed to walk on a football field with my grandson, who was a senior, and his mom. So, I didn't want to miss that.
Wow.
I would have been a bad granddaddy if I'd have missed that. So,
yeah.
It was there. Dr. Duke did a great job at 5:00 anyway, so.
That's awesome.
But
yeah, I got to listen to some of that. That was really good.
So next Thursday, we're going to be back. She's going to be teaching.
Yeah, we'll get past the First Amendment, I promise.
But a lot of people didn't realize how much was in that one.
Oh my gosh, I know. There was so much thought that went into this. Yeah.
So we just hear freedom of speech and we leave it alone. We like, no, you got to go into it.
Oh yeah, deep dive.
Right. So this is great. I'm grateful. I'm blessed to have you on with me. I forgot to contact Dr. Shaw. He gonna bust my head now.
In trouble.
I'm in trouble, but yes, we're going to be doing great.
Awesome.
I could keep going, but I gotta go to bed. I gotta be up at 2:30 and punching in by 3:00. So I blame y'all for this. But we want to thank you guys. Tune in tomorrow. Not tomorrow. Yeah, tune in tomorrow. We're going to do a Facebook Live as soon as the books arrive.
Awesome.
So we're going to do a Facebook Live. And I did something in this book. So I'm letting y'all know now. So nobody say anything. I didn't write a forward for the book. I didn't put in an introduction of why I wrote the book. I didn't even put information about me in the book. I want you to look me up. I want people to be able to get the book, like it, and say, who is this person? We're glad to have you. It would not be a show without Spotted T. Spotted T, we thank you for being on all the time. Now we're gonna have to get you on the show, or you're gonna have to call in, because you can't be cheating like this. We're gonna have to have you. We're gonna have to have you on, because I'm still trying to figure out who is the Spotted T. So
I already know I'm gonna like her because I love tea.
I know, right? So we're gonna have to find out who she is. She hiding from us. But let's. I'm working on connecting Rumble, and once we connect Rumble, then we'll be doing YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Rumble at the same time. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, and
Gab
Rumble.
has one too now.
Who?
Gab.
I just got to see if they're, what is it, the RTMP?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, if I can get that, then I can connect it, and then we good. We can go. So I'll be working on those. I'm also taking the audio. We're going to be editing it, and it'll be on Spotify, Apple.
Nice.
Sit down and write a book about me. I ain't writing no book, sir. I'm going to make a movie of you, sir. What'd she say? Oh, maybe.
Met.
Oh, so see, the expense just keep it going. We're met. Okay, we met already. Okay. You still ain't gonna share your secret. Oh, that's Russ laughing because I said we're not gonna write the book. We just gonna make the straight movie. And Russ, the name of the movie is The Ultimate Battle Royal, and in the movie it's going to be Jason, Freddy Krueger, Chucky, and Russ. And then we're gonna watch you win that battle and come out on top.
There you go.
Sold out, I bet. Yep. So, but we thank you guys. We're gonna.
I've always been kind of a not a fan of emojis, but it is interesting to see. You can actually see where everybody's coming from when they just post those.
I know. And then what's funny, like on mine, if somebody sent up a heart, I get to see an angry face. I don't know why.
Oh, weird.
I'm shy. Okay. All right. But we just keep watching though. Tell other people to join in on Tuesdays and Thursdays for the show. Tuesday we're teaching on the kingdom of God. And I think I'm gonna do a teaching about I don't even know yet because it changes every time I get ready to do one.
Yeah.
But we're gonna do a great teaching on Tuesday with the Word of God, talking about the kingdom of God. That's all we're gonna talk about, the kingdom of God. Oh, I got to tell you this, Sarah, before we go. You got to hear this one.
Okay.
So I told people that they've been preaching the wrong gospel, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, you guys been preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, but you haven't been preaching the gospel that Christ preached.
Yeah.
And the guy was like, well, what are you talking about? I said, you're preaching the death, burial, and resurrection. Jesus preached the gospel of the kingdom.
Yeah.
And he said, okay. I said, well, let's take a look. I said, what did John the Baptist preach? He said, the kingdom. I said, what did Jesus preach? He said, the kingdom. I said, then he sent out 12. What did they preach? He said, the kingdom. I said, then he sent out 70 more. What did they preach? The kingdom. I said, in Acts chapter 28, verse 30 and 31, what did Paul preach? He said, the kingdom. I said, so tell me something. When did you change the message?
Nice.
And he was like, oh, wow. I said, so if we would go back to the beginning, to the original thing, just like if we go back with the Constitution to the original, it makes life a lot easy.
Yep.
Because look at since they've been preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, look how many people got different rules. You can't wear pants. You can't wear lipstick. You can't wear makeup. You can't have a TV. You can't have a TV.
Yeah. You can't dance. You can't. Yeah.
You can't go swimming.
You can't have fun at all.
Oh.
Christianity is the most boring, horrible thing you've ever experienced. But here, come join the club.
Right. And if you don't do it the way we say, you're going to hell.
Yes.
You know, you sit there like, I don't want it then.
Yeah, like, oh, that sounds like a winner. I'm all sold out for that.
So you telling me to leave my fun over here to come to the town of I can't do.
You do realize that Jesus was actually at a wedding and turned water into wine for his first miracle, right? Like this is he, and I'm pretty sure he wasn't sitting up against the wall holding it up while everybody else partied. I mean, that was like a Jewish tradition. They partied hard.
Russ, good night, Russ. Look at him.
The Amish are looking good right now.
But you're right. It's so much that's going on that we just want to lock folks up, and instead of being free, you know. And I tell people all the time, when we have a gathering, we play this card game called Spades. Have you ever heard of Spades?
Yep.
Okay. So I tell people that if you don't play spades, don't take it personal. We just won't bite you over.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to question, do I belong to God because I play spades?
Yeah.
So you can't come over. Like there's some people won't even let you play Monopoly because you're shaking dice.
Oh,
you be sitting there like, are you serious?
Yeah, you're gambling there.
Yeah. So we're about to know, Russ, people are judged by now.
What? I'm confused.
I am too. I'm confused, Russ.
And I saw that Weird Al reference, by the way.
That who?
It's a music. Oh goodness. I'll share the video with you.
Okay.
Oh no.
You'll get an education.
Who said, oh no, your daughter?
Yeah.
So people, we're going to go and allow Sarah to be mommy now. She got to do mommy duty. She done did teacher duty, doing homeschooling. She done did county supervisor duty. She done did constitutional duty. Now we just gonna let her be mommy and wife duty. So
there we go.
So we thank everybody for watching. We love you guys, and stay tuned. We love you and see you guys real soon.
Awesome.
We got the keys to the kingdom. it is. We got the keys to the kingdom. Yes, we do. I know we gonna unlock the things from wherever you may. We got the keys to the kingdom. Yes, we do. I know we gonna unlock the things from the Lord. No matter what you're going through, Jesus got the keys for you. You can bind things on earth, it shall be bound in heaven. You can lose things on earth, it shall be loose in heaven.